Alright, in 3.7 we're going to look at this thing called the base angle theorem. So I think you guys are going to like this. Our base angle theorem states if, and we're going to refer to this figure below, if side AB is congruent to side AC, as we have marked, that means that the base angles, and which ones are the base angles, you can kind of think about it, you know, kind of going like this side points to that angle and this side points to that angle, that these base angles will be congruent. So then we can say then angle B is congruent to angle C. So basically if you have two congruent sides, their opposite angles or their base angles will also be congruent. Now the converse of that means opposite. So if you were to first say if angle A is congruent to angle B, so let's say you start out with congruent angles instead, and that means that their opposite sides will also be congruent. Go ahead and mark those as congruent. So then AC is congruent to BC. Alright, so that base angle theorem, if you have two congruent sides, their opposite angles are congruent, those are your base angles, or if you have two congruent angles, even if they're not on the bottom where we might like base angles to be, you could turn, rotate that triangle. These are your base angles, their opposite sides will also be congruent. Alright, and then lastly in our intro video, just some things to talk about with this example here. We've got a triangle with three different side lengths. So it's going to be helpful to know, if you know the side lengths in comparison to each other, so for example, this is our biggest side, our middle side, and our smallest side. So let's go ahead and write that in. So biggest side is the 22, and maybe we'll just say smallest side. But just know that that 10 is in between these two, is the 8. Alright, so opposite of the biggest side, so if I were to take this biggest side and go to the opposite angle, that is going to be the biggest angle of your triangle. How crazy is that? The smallest, so angle B, is the biggest angle because it's opposite from the biggest side. That works for the smallest also. Whatever your smallest side is, if you go to the angle across from it, that's going to be the smallest angle of the triangle. So just some helpful things to keep in mind when you're comparing your three sides and your three angles. You may not have all the information, but without knowing the measure of angle B, I know it's going to be the biggest angle in here because it's opposite of the biggest side. And same thing goes for the smallest there.